As this video is being recorded, the NBA trade deadline just passed, and to everybody's disappointment, the Knicks failed to make a single move. Now, I wasn't expecting the Knicks to make some blockbuster trade, but I was hoping that they could trade at least one or two of their veterans like Kemba Walker or Alec Burks by the NBA trade deadline. This could have had a couple of benefits. For starters, I was hoping that the Knicks could get themselves an asset like a draft pick in return, but more importantly, trading one or two of those guys would have opened up a spot in the rotation for some of these young players on the Knicks that's rotting on the bench. Not trading a veteran by the deadline means we have no idea how much more of Cam Reddish we're going to see in the last 30 or so games of the season. Now, Cam Reddish has been on the Knicks roster for about a month now, and in that time, he's barely played. Now, he has started to play a little bit more over these last handful of games, but that's only because there's a whole bunch of injuries to the roster. Thibodeau has already shown that when the roster is fully healthy, he's not a part of the rotation. The problem is that when the Knicks traded for Cam Reddish, they didn't trade a rotation player for him. They traded Kevin Knox, who was a bench warmer and a pick, for Cam Reddish. Had the Knicks traded Alec Burks or Kemba Walker or a veteran who's in the rotation, that would have allowed Thibodeau to more easily put Cam Reddish in the second unit and give him a solid 20 to 25 minutes a game. By not trading anybody, this means that the Knicks probably aren't going to get an extended look of Cam over these last 2 months of the season, and that's a huge disappointment. Now, to be fair to the Knicks front office, I can understand why a trade didn't get done by the trade deadline. It was reported that the Knicks were trying to shop their veterans, but there just simply wasn't any takers. And when you look at how the veterans on the Knicks have played this year, it really isn't a surprise. Right before the deadline, it was reported that the Knicks were shopping Julius Randle, they were shopping Evan Fournier, they were shopping Alec Burks, and they were shopping Kemba Walker. And all four of those guys have been underperforming all year. When the Knicks signed Kemba Walker, they were hoping that they were upgrading the position, but he just totally looks like a diminished version of what he used to be back in Charlotte. He no longer has that explosiveness that he used to have back when he was a star in Charlotte. He's not getting to the rim anymore. As a result, he's an inconsistent offensive player and a complete defensive liability. So it's no surprise that nobody offered anything of value for Kemba Walker. When you look at somebody like Alec Burks, I still think Alec Burks is a good versatile player, but he's been in a slump over this past month, which has probably tanked his value. He's only been shooting about 38% from the field in the month of January, and as a result, no contender was probably looking at Alec Burks and was thinking that that was somebody they wanted to get. Then you look at somebody like Evan Fournier. Over the past month, Evan Fournier actually is starting to look like the player that the Knicks were hoping they were getting when they offered him $73 million, but it's still a small sample size. And like Kemba Walker, he also tends to be inconsistent on offense, and he's also a defensive liability. So it's understandable why nobody was offering anything of value for him. And then Julius Randle, it was reported not too long ago that other teams like the Sacramento Kings had interest in Julius Randle, but Julius Randle has just been having a completely underwhelming season. His shooting has been horrible, his defense has been horrible, but not just that. The way that he's handled adversity, between how he's been acting towards the fans, between his headbutting with Coach Thibodeau and the assistants, he's just been a toxic player and an underwhelming player, and it's no wonder why nobody offered anything of value for Randle. So while it's understandable why the Knicks weren't able to get a trade done by the deadline, it's still a huge disappointment because now, going into the rest of the season, it doesn't look like the Knicks are going to make the playoffs. At best, they look like they'll be in the play-in tournament, but they'll get smacked by whoever they play. So the Knicks are just going to be playing their veterans, and they're just going to be losing for the rest of the season, while their young guys like Cameron Reddish and Miles McBride are going to be rotting on the bench and not getting the playing time that they need to help them develop. So where do the Knicks go from here? In my opinion, the Knicks need to shift towards a rebuild. This means that Thibodeau needs to stop playing the veterans as much, and he needs to play the kids more. Now, Thibodeau probably isn't going to willingly do this because we all know he wants to make the playoffs. But there's really no benefit to this team of fighting for a playoff spot. For one thing, there's no way they're going to make the playoffs without the play-in tournament. They're just in that much of a hole with only about a couple months left. And even if by some miracle they do win the play-in tournament, they're just going to find themselves getting embarrassed in the first round again. that wouldn't be too beneficial in the long term. What would be better for the Knicks would be to play the veterans less, probably buy Kemba Walker out and let him go to a contender, and play the young guys more, play Cam Reddish more, play Quentin Grimes more, play Miles McBride more. Not only would this experience be good for their development, but this would also lead to more losses, and this would also increase the Knicks' chances of getting a high draft pick. And yes, it sucks after making the playoffs last year to miss the playoffs this year, but this could be beneficial for the Knicks in the long term. It's okay to take a step back. Look at the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors made the playoffs in the 2019 and 2020 season and got all the way to the second round. But last year, their all-star Pascal Siakam was underachieving all year, just like Julius Randle has been underachieving all year for the Knicks this year. And guess what? They ended up in the lottery. They got a high draft pick. They got the number 4 pick, and they drafted a stud in Scotty Barnes. And now the Raptors are one of the most young and exciting teams in the league. So for the Knicks, it's okay for them to take a step back after making the playoffs this year. Play the young guys more, tank, get yourself a nice high draft pick, and hit on that draft pick come draft time. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for me. That's the end of the video. Drop a like on the video and subscribe if you enjoyed this. And I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Were you also disappointed that the Knicks didn't make a trade at the deadline? What trade would you have liked the Knicks to have made? Let me know. Thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.